Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks, come to you live from Warsaw. I'm Jastrzębska. The summer has brought record-breaking temperatures, devastating wildfires and prolonged heat waves across Europe. As extreme weather becomes more frequent and intense, questions are growing over how fast the climate is changing and whether Europe is prepared for what's to come. To discuss, I am joined by Antoni Bielewicz, Executive Director for the EU and Central and Eastern Europe Programme's European Climate Foundation. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So let's start domestically, because Poland broke its all-time temperature record just a month ago, and now we're facing another severe heat wave. So hot summers and individual temperature records are nothing new, of course. So how do scientists distinguish between natural weather fluctuations and the effects of climate change? I mean, what tells us that what we're seeing now is part of a broader shift?
Great question, and actually very much asked very often. Look, scientists usually do statistics, so they take some events and also extreme events across the year and try to compare them to the average of the similar events in the past. And by that, they know whether we are talking about individual events or some processes of a much longer and much severe impact. And that can help in affiliating some of the events to the climate change. Of course, it's always a little bit fluid, so it's very difficult to say whether the current heat wave or the current wildfire was caused by climate change or by regular weather, but definitely because of the because of the fact that these events are appearing much more often, you can say that this is impacted by some changes initiated by people and by the changes in the climate.
So there's a high probability that we are indeed dealing with climate change, right? And it's not just a Polish problem.
That is correct. Thank you.
Because Europe is...
No, it's a global problem.
Warming, right? I wanted to sort of zoom in on Europe because it is apparently warming considerably faster than the global average. Why so?
There are several reasons for that. It's much more populated, it's much more dense and much more populated, which makes the impact much more observed. It's also caused by the geography of Europe, which is located in a specific place in the global climate system, which makes it impacted by several different smaller scale processes that are happening in the climate change system, which are connected, for instance, to currents in the northern in the Atlantic Sea or the significant growth in temperature in the Mediterranean Sea. It's very complex system, but it's basically impacting it is impacting our lives in Europe much more severe than in several other regions.
So heat waves also carry an economic cost, from lower agricultural yields and reduced worker productivity to pressure on electricity grids and sort of damage to infrastructure potentially even. Are governments still underestimating that cost when they weigh the price of climate action against the price of doing nothing?
Unfortunately, I have to agree with such question and with such thesis that is embedded into that question. And as a human, I even understand that a little bit, because we are talking about immediate spendings to prevent much more longer processes that are happening that will happen in, let's say, 20, 30 or 50 years. So it's very difficult sometimes to invest yourself and invest your limited capacities into something that will not bring immediate effect, but maybe, or we are sure as scientists and activists, we are sure that will prevent from much more severe impacts in the future.
So There is also potentially a question of inequality here, because, I mean, wealthy households can install air conditioning or simply leave cities during periods of extreme heat. Others cannot, right? So could extreme heat increasingly become a social as well as an environmental problem in Europe?
Definitely so. And you can see that especially in the cities. Cities are right now very much divided into districts of much more affluential groups and less economically equipped groups, let's put it that way. And we can see that in some districts, the infrastructure to address the heat waves, the density of systems preventing the heat waves are much more limited. Not to mention the fact that even the elements of that infrastructure are very often, industrial infrastructure are very often located in poorer districts of the cities, which also impacts somehow the current well-being of neighborhood. So this is a very important issue. Unfortunately, for all of us, there are some impacts of the climate change that we are influenced by them very often, all of us. So let's think about these wildfires right now. There is not much of a difference between poorer districts and much more affluent districts of the cities if you have to run and leave your city immediately because of the wildfire approaching the outskirts of the city. So this is something like this reminds us that we are all facing the same problem.
So let's turn to policy for a moment, because Europe has some of the world's most ambitious climate policies. But the EU produces only a fairly small share of global emissions, while countries like China and the United States emit far more. So how much difference can Europe really make if the world's biggest emitters don't move at the same pace?
This is a very popular question. First of all, if we take into account historic emissions, the impact of Europe, especially industrial powerhouses like UK, Germany, France, is much more significant. And what a paradox, even Silesia region, governed by other superpowers in the past, is contributed significantly to the CO2 emissions. That's the first point. The second point, definitely EU plays a role of a leader in ambitious climate policies, and by that we are the first to set up the instruments and to describe the potential playing field or battlefield to tackle the climate change, which is very important. So that's also worth mentioning. We are an example and a reference point for the rest of the globe, and I could hardly imagine anyone else acting against climate change without the EU, without the richest continent, without the continent with the most advanced technologies, and so on and so forth. So China wouldn't follow us if we weren't there in the first place. And the third point is that actually the mechanics of climate change is very specific. It's not about the increase of the CO2 emissions only. It's on the every additional millions of tons of CO2, no matter where it comes from. So no matter whether it's India or China. So this is very important to remember, that we have some role to play. And of course, it's combined with some costs that we have to address. But I believe that in the third decade of 21st century, we are so exposed to climate change that all these efforts are not perceived as useless and too long-term planned, because we are facing impacts of the climate change on our own, and we are actually doing something to prevent that on our own.
So what should be Europe's goals when it comes to combating climate change moving forward?
Well, Europe is the first continent, and the first EU is the first international community and the first global player to set up a goal to lower emission, the net emission, so the total emission of CO2 with absorption of CO2 to nearly zero in 2050, around 2050, and this is the ambition that ambition impacts significantly all the economy and all the socio-economic processes around, and this is the guidance and the North Star for the rest of the global players to be followed. Unfortunately, given the political uncertainty. Some players follow and some players decide not to follow this example for now.
Mm-hmm. Right, because there's a political challenge there too, right? I mean, climate policies can be expensive, both for households and businesses. So how big is the risk that they lose public support if people begin to feel that, going green means a lower standard of living or a less competitive economy?
I think we are facing that situation of a significant loss of a public support to climate policies right now. You probably remember, and our viewers remember, the European Green Deal to be introduced around 2018, 2019, when young teenagers protesting on the streets pushed for the ambitious climate policies. And that was the moment when climate policy was high on the public agenda everywhere in the EU. So that was a clear signal of a public support for that. Now, this support is dropping due to the concerns that you've just mentioned about. So we are talking about potential impact on our household budgets. We are talking about potential losses on short-term productivity and short-term competitiveness. But I believe, and I'm pretty sure, that the changes that we will observe and the processes that we will observe in the global climate system will bring back the climate change policy and the need for an ambitious climate policy, bring it back to the public agenda. And I think that the summer of 2026 will be this significant event that maybe will mark the importance of the climate change on minds of citizens of the EU.
So, Antoni, before we go, one last question. We often talk about climate change, but how much warming is already unavoidable, and what can Europe do to adjust here and now?
This is a difficult question. Probably you know that the United Nations experts are developing way more about 200 scenarios that predict potential growth in the global average global temperature. I'm afraid that we will not secure this super ambitious goal of 1.5 degree of Celsius of the average global growth of the temperature. We are still somewhere around 2.2, 2.3 degrees of the increase of the average temperature for in the world. Unfortunately, the average is a very difficult indicator because it can mean that in some regions, and it will mean that in some regions of the world, we will have increase of 5 degrees of Celsius, and in some regions this increase will be much slower. So its future looks gloomy, but we still have a hope to address the most severe processes and the most impactful changes that we can see in the future.
And with this, we have to conclude. Antoni Bielewicz, European Climate Foundation, thank you so very much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me again. Thanks.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.